Hi guys, let's talk about something interesting today. It's about understanding your true desires, distinguishing genuine ones from those imposed by society, as well as from various misconceptions and illusions. And it's also worth discussing why this is necessary today. First and foremost, try to understand what among all this is actually you. In other words, what does this me, the one who's doing things and living life, truly want? You, the one living this life, have you ever asked yourself who you are, what you really are? And this is a very important question. And in the process of self-discovery, personal growth, and self-knowledge, we gradually find more and more answers to it. It doesn't matter whether we ask ourselves this question or not, whether we seek the answer or not. Eventually, at some point, we get this answer. Who am I really? And this answer is not quite what we usually look for. It's not an answer like, I am this, that, and so on. How does a person usually answer this question? That I am a man, I am a woman, I am some kind of specialist. Basically, whatever we identify ourselves with, that's what we tend to call ourselves. But in reality, that's not it at all. Moreover, that's not correct at all, and as we gradually become more self-aware, this answer slowly comes to us. And this true desire is, in fact, not even the desire of the personality, or the body, or the person, but rather the desire of some inner spark within us that lives inside us as the soul, as something like a fragment of something higher, something greater, that gently leads us somewhere. Well, our true desires are actually not made up by our mind. They simply come as ideas. They come as something fresh, as something very pleasant, very warm, something heartwarming, something soulful, which as a rule leads to growth. These desires are not always logical. Sometimes these desires are absolutely irrational. They may seem, and some may even be inappropriate or wrong perhaps. Not in the sense that they're unethical or anything like that, but in the sense that they might seem unrealistic. For example, a person might want to do something creative, like sing on stage, but at the same time, they're currently working in a highly technical field, like IT, for instance. Or it might seem like they don't have that kind of talent, or they've never done it before and they're already quite old. But this desire keeps coming back from time to time, and it's quite strong. And usually accompanied by all these doubts and objections like, no, how could I possibly do this? Why would I start doing this now? But if we want to connect with ourselves more and more, then it's best to satisfy these genuine impulses that come from within. At least take steps in that direction. That is, if we suddenly feel like going somewhere, traveling, or doing something, and it comes with this very pleasant inner impulse, just imagining that we do it already makes us feel really good inside. This is a true desire. But if everything is logical and makes sense, and at the same time there isn't that kind of joy that opens up, that feeling of, if I do this, it will be really great. Here, we need to question whether this desire is truly genuine. And why are we even talking about this topic? Why separate genuine, real desires from those that are made up, maybe imposed by society, the so-called right desires that are encouraged, like, you should want this, you should want your own apartment, you should want to start a family, for example, you should want to have children, and so on. Well, these are some standard things that everyone usually strives for in life, some kind of social norms and rules. And many people accept them for themselves without even realizing it. Well, because everyone says you should want these things, but hardly anyone actually checks whether they really need them or not. At certain moments it might seem like you should want them, but then suddenly it feels like, no, this is nonsense. And it goes without saying that results depend heavily on this as well. So if we truly want something, if there's real passion living inside, then of course we achieve it, and often quite quickly. Well, at the very least we strive for it, right? If we direct all our energy, all our strength, all our attention toward achieving such goals, then they are reached fairly quickly and easily, provided that everything is in order with this flow of life that passes through us, which should be going in great quantity. However, when we go through challenging times, a kind of rethinking, it's sometimes called a crisis, whether it's a midlife crisis, a crisis of younger or older age, and so on. then it turns out that this whole idea we've been living by, the foundation or basis we've built for ourselves, is not actually what it seemed to be. We start to receive confirmation that things really aren't the way we thought they were. And this is a really interesting moment because at this point, the foundation a person has been trying to stabilize all this time and live by, following these beaten tracks, naturally start to crack and come undone. In other words, their standard basic beliefs, convictions, certain principles and rules all begin to slip away. So they all start to change and become doubtful. But why is it actually a very good period? Because at this moment, a person is able to look at everything happening in their life in a new, genuine and sincere way, and to explore it. Because some other time, if a person isn't engaged in this kind of self-examination and review of everything happening to them, then first of all, they're not in the present moment. In other words, life becomes uninteresting to us. And this lack of interest in life is what leads us to review everything. We become so fed up with it. We start to suffer so much, get caught up in our fears and other things, that we just can't take it anymore. It becomes unpleasant for us, and we start to look at things. Damn, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I'm not getting it right or something. We start to question all of this. And here, sincere desires are what matter because everything insincere gets exposed in this process of questioning. When you examine it, it burns away because when a person has suffered enough, they're no longer willing to strive for something that's not truly theirs, something they didn't genuinely want. In other words, it just falls away. When we have little energy, when we're worried about something, when we've suffered enough, when we've had a lot of these fears, we no longer want to do a bunch of unnecessary things because we simply don't have that much energy. And the desire to just do something for the sake of doing it basically disappears. And we start to look at whether we really need this so that we keep only the most valuable, only what is truly necessary. And what we truly want gives us a burst of energy. It gives us that inner spark, a genuine motivation, even without any external motivation really. Life itself opens up to us through this, and we're ready to do anything for it. And this inner fire allows us to move forward, discarding everything unnecessary. And this is a very important point. That's why today's broadcast is dedicated to the topic of how to find out what it is that I really want. And specifically, how to ignite and follow this genuine desire. Because if we do something we don't truly want to do, sooner or later we burn out. This burnout that so many people talk about, in jobs, in certain activities, burnout only happens if a person monotonously does the same thing over and over and has lost interest in it. You can lose interest when you're not living in the present moment, when you're doing something for the sake of the result and not for the process itself, when you're not focused on the process, not feeling what's happening right now, but just following a template, just going through some standard steps. In that case, of course, each time it's not as interesting. And as a result, a person loses interest, burnout occurs, and then they are forced to remain in a state of apathy or even depression, especially if this goes on for a long time. And they stop experiencing the joy of life, stop getting any pleasure from it. At that moment, their energy drops significantly. That's why, in this case, practice, for example, helps you see your own resistances and blocks and release them through acceptance. What is a lack of energy, a lack of strength, apathy, depression, and even illnesses, really? Well, to put it briefly, life should constantly flow through us, yes. This stream of life is always passing through us. If it flows normally, if nothing is blocking it, then we are energized, lively, cheerful. We want to live, to do something new, ideas come to us, and in this way we live quite actively and keep moving forward. And as this happens, we experience pleasure, awareness, and some pleasant bonuses from life. Life itself starts to help us. The more of this flow we let pass through us, the more we help other people, do something useful somewhere, in general, do what we truly want. When it's genuine, what we want also brings joy or help to others. It has to be like that. So in this way, we live this life and gain awareness. And this enjoyment of what we do is, in essence, the flow of life passing through us. This joy is the very amount of that flow, which streams like an abundance of light. And when we are open to life, everything becomes much easier. But if we are closed off from life, then at a certain stage of our life, we gain inner blocks. We can't control this. And so through acceptance, through accepting the blocks that we find inside, we release them. The first step is to become aware of them. The second step is, accordingly, to work with them. And so, through mindfulness, through observation, through searching for our true desires, including a certain direction, when we choose what to strive to, we will encounter some difficulties. It's inevitable. It's always like that, because it is through these difficulties that we ultimately grow, and we encounter certain challenges. We start to feel a certain sensation about it. For example, we get upset or offended, or maybe we do something else, like get scared of something. And usually this sensation repeats itself, and we get scared of it because it's unpleasant for us. But we learn to change our attitude toward this sensation, that is acceptance. In other words, we learn to experience this sensation in such a way that we become free from it. And this sense of liberation, which we experience in our lives, is what we call acceptance. That is the result of truly embracing acceptance.